This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome to the special Michigan football postgame edition of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am your host, Vito. Yesterday, Michigan, in a blowout fashion, defeated Penn State, getting revenge on the Nittany Lions for that loss a year ago by Michigan to Penn State at Happy Valley. Remember, it was a 42-13 victory by Penn State a year ago. Michigan flips the script and scores 42 on the Nittany Lions in Ann Arbor yesterday, getting some sweet revenge in the process. And Michigan, with the victory, improving to 8-1 overall and also 3-0 in the Big Ten East Division. Penn State falling to 6-3 overall and 1-3 in the Big Ten East Division. Now, the only team standing in Michigan's way the rest of the way this season in the Big Ten East are the Ohio State Buckeyes, who, remember, currently stand at 8-1 overall as well and at 3-0 in the Big Ten East. That game is coming up in the final week of the regular season as usual. The biggest game of the season for both squads. As long as Michigan wins out until playing Ohio State at Ohio State. Remember, Michigan has a contest first and foremost with Rutgers at Rutgers a week from now, and then 2 weeks from now against Indiana at the Big House. So Michigan must take advantage of these, relatively easy matchups coming up in the next 2 weeks before facing off with Urban Meyer and the Buckeyes in the final week of the regular season. Now, Karan Higdon, let's talk about him really quick. He was so darn impressive on the ground throughout the whole entire game yesterday as he rushed for a $132 and 1 TD. That was good for an average of 6.6 yards per carry for the senior running back out of Sarasota, Florida. And a past guest, remember, of John Macaroon's one-on-one podcast on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. So he was huge, has been pivotal all throughout the season in getting it done for Michigan, allowing Michigan to put together 8 straight victories and now going into Rutgers next week. And Karan has rushed for 100-plus yards in 7 straight games. And the streak started against Western Michigan, remember, in week 2. And he missed the SMU game. But since then, he rushed for a $136 against Nebraska, a $115 against Northwestern, 103 and then 105 yards against Maryland and Wisconsin, respectively. A $144 against Michigan State before the bye. And then 132 once again yesterday against Penn State. He has been huge, even when the passing game maybe hasn't been there. Very evident for Michigan with Shay Patterson under center. Yet, you could argue as well, and I've said it myself repeatedly now, that Shay Patterson is making the big throws when it counts. Maybe only a couple of big throws a game, but that's all it's taken for Michigan to put together this streak of 8 straight victories since losing in week 1 at Notre Dame. Thus, Michigan is also undefeated at home this season. And Jim Harbaugh said it himself, it felt a different way at the Big House yesterday. It felt like when Jim Harbaugh was playing, he said, when he was donning the maize and blue. It was that kind of a raucous atmosphere at the Big House yesterday. Now, with all of that being said, I had the chance to recap the game with Brandon Justice of the Wolverine Lounge, a great friend of the DSP network, and I also had the chance to talk with junior linebacker Josh Uche and also fifth-year senior defensive end Chase Winovich in the postgame presser. Now, before those chats with Josh and Chase, though, let me get to my recap of the game with Brandon Justice. So Brandon Justice with me for this special post-game edition of a Michigan victory over Penn State 42-7, and really impressive, obviously, from Michigan. Dominated in all facets imaginable throughout the whole entire 4 quarters, I would say, Brandon. How would you break down the game, and what did you see in this Michigan victory?
Yeah, I think Michigan did something really different this season again. It's 3 straight wins over ranked opponents. I know that Wisconsin and Michigan State aren't ranked now, but at the time of it, and you think back to when we were looking at it this season. I know when we were approaching this, I kind of mentioned to you the last time we did it was against SMU, and you think about how different the team's outlook was at that juncture. Think about where it was last season against these 3 teams. Demolished by Penn State for the most part. pretty beat up by Wisconsin despite being in it in the second half. And then Michigan State, we all know how that went. So, and you look back at these 3 games, and they're outscoring them like 90. I don't have the exact number, but it's something around 90 to like 24. They're not just beating teams. They are beating up teams. And you look around the country and you see all these top-end teams. You see Ohio State struggle with Nebraska today in the conference. You look at Florida that just got demolished by Missouri. And then you take a look at this Michigan team, and they're doing everything that's been asked of them, that's been expected of them by the committee, by the national media, by people who – there's no way that you walk away from this game without thinking Michigan isn't a playoff team. That's pretty much my point here. Penn State, not that great. Probably like a 20 to 25, maybe as high as 15 ranked team in the country, if we're being honest, especially with a healthy Trace McSorley. But at this juncture, for Michigan to do what it did to Penn State tonight, that's not just a loss. That was a beatdown. And in 2 seasons, Penn State hasn't lost a game by more than 4 points, and they just got beat by a lot more than that tonight. So I'm pretty impressed with what Michigan did. I'm pretty impressed with the control that they have in this game. I know that a lot of people are quick to question the play calling, but there's a rhyme and a reason, and there's a method to the madness that goes on when that happens. They're just controlling and controlling and controlling. At one point, I think they had 37 plays to Penn State's 13 in the first half. I mean, that's just the name of the game. Sometimes, sure, you don't capitalize and you get the touchdown, but those things come when the offense starts clicking in the second half, and next thing you know, you're up 42-0.
You know what? Michigan flipped the switch from a year ago, too. Penn State scored 42 on Michigan. Michigan scores 42 on Penn State, and it seemed like revenge was intensely on the minds of these football players from Michigan, including Chase Winovich, Karan Higdon, Shay Patterson. Karan and Shay, especially in the postgame presser, Brandon, as you know, really hinted at it, that they really thought about this. Well, they were hungry to get that revenge and to prove to Penn State that last year was much more of a fluke. And even I bring up Shay, who wasn't a part of the team last year, but knew about what happened and was there for his teammates and pretty much defended them by having a really good, second half, you could say, in this game tonight, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're seeing out of Shay Patterson is in recent weeks, I think Shay Patterson's always been a guy who a lot of people thought he was going to come in and be the star of the team, and he wasn't going to be much of a leader. He was going to be mostly a player. You're kind of seeing that swing the other way. He's been quite the player, quite the playmaker when he needs it, not really putting up numbers because it's not being asked of him. I wouldn't say they're not giving him the opportunity. They don't really need to risk any of that, right? They're calling the safe plays, and they're still beating teams 42-7. So with Shay Patterson, I think the biggest takeaway I have from him isn't on the field. It's what he's doing with his voice while he's on it. It has nothing to do with his arm. It has everything to do with the leadership. He's slowly becoming a captain of this team, so it seems. And I know that you've probably heard it from earlier this week in media availability where Don Brown said that during the Michigan State game, Shay Patterson got in Don Brown's face. And I don't know if anybody listening at home knows what Don Brown's like, but not the guy you want to get in the face of, right? Shay Patterson, no fear in his eyes, looked him in the eye and told him to get him the ball back that he wanted to score in the next drive, the first play, an 80-yard bomb to Donovan Peoples-Jones. And then tonight you see him speak in the post-game presser, and as you mentioned, not a part of this team last year, and he said, but I know what they did to my brothers. I know what they did to my brothers. And that really resonated to me because Wilton Spate, a great leader. John O'Corn, pretty good leader as well. Obviously, those guys aren't as talented as Shay Patterson, but a lot of us believe that Spate was probably the better leader than him going into the season. But now you're hearing things from Shay Patterson that you don't hear very often from other quarterbacks in the public too, saying that and voicing, I know what they did to my team. I know what they did to my team. This is a team that plays very loose, and they seem to have a lot of fun in their celebrations and poke fun at other teams who did the same to them last season. But at the end of the day, this team just seems very serious about one thing, and that's winning the week and winning the week and winning the week. And I think they've kind of adapted that from their head man, Jim Harbaugh, who got a lot of slack coming into this year, wins 3 straight big games, and now goes into Rutgers. So you come off a bye week, you beat Penn State, and for lack of better terms, it's probably another bye week where you had to Piscataway. You just hope to go in there, and the spread might be 35 for all we know. But you got to be happy with where they're at right now. If you're a fan at home, you got to be happy. This team has to be happy, and to see Shay Patterson kind of become more than just a player, but also a leader is pretty encouraging for this team's future.
And speaking of Michigan's defensive coordinator, Don Brown, and Jim Harbaugh in the postgame presser called him the king of defensive coordinators. I believe that more and more by the day. What do you have to say about that yourself, Brandon?
Well, I think it's no secret. Michigan's defense is its final piece of the puzzle to what it needs to get into the playoff, right? The things that needed to come together, their offensive line and their offense and all those things, while it's not clicking at the highest level, it's clicking at a good enough level. The defense being as good as it is what scares Alabama, is what scares LSU, it's what scares a rematch with Notre Dame. Those teams probably the utmost confidence, like any other team would be going into a game. Of course, you're not going to act like you're scared. But at the end of the day, they are scheming to no end how to get past this Michigan defense. Penn State, sure, they lost Saquon Barkley and they lost to Sean Hamilton. That's still a potent offense. That's still an offense that had a day on Ohio State. They were a crazy comeback away from beating Ohio State. And Ohio State is a team that's right behind Michigan in the conference. That is Michigan's only competition in the East now. They've taken care of Michigan State. They've taken care of Penn State. The only thing that stands in their way is an Ohio State team that just isn't the team that it was before. And Michigan's defense has such a strong matchup with all of its opponents left on this schedule. Only 3 games left, which is crazy to think about. But look at what Ohio State's doing on offense. There's one thing it cannot do. It cannot run the ball. It is having a huge issue running the ball. Has a lot to do with the fact that Dwayne Haskins doesn't have any legs, really. He's probably good for a 3 or 4 yard run. And for the first time, Michigan has the better running quarterback than Ohio State going into the game. Michigan has the number 1 pass defense in the country, lining up against an Ohio State team that can only push the ball at a high level. They can get a couple first downs on runs, but they can only drive the ball for a touchdown when passing the ball. And Michigan is defending that like no other in the country. They're almost doing the same on the run. I think Penn State had -6 rush yards at halftime. So it's just one of those things where it's like, how can you really critique a defense that's essentially been, for the most part, perfect for 3 straight weeks, making Alex Hornibrook, Brian Lewerke, and Trace McSorley, 2 of the 3, 1 of the 3, 3 of the 3, however you want to say it, are pretty formidable guys, and they're making them look like high school quarterbacks, like 2 stars out of, I don't know, what's a random city where people don't play football? Wyoming. We'll go with that one. So it's just, it's a sight to see. Don Brown continues to impress a lot of people. And I try to be as objective as possible when it comes to this team, but it's hard to say much else about them. They are dominating in Alabama fashion right now.
So Rutgers, Indiana, and then Ohio State to round out the season. What's your outlook for the remainder of the season?
Well, a lot of people, before the season, the number 1 narrative about this team was one thing, its schedule. Its schedule is going to hold them back from anything. They could be as good as they want, but the schedule was going to be what held them back. They're past that part. The hard part of the schedule is over with. They got through it. They won all 3. The only Band-Aid they have right now is Notre Dame, and that's a really good-looking Band-Aid, I guess you could say, with them probably being number 2 or number 3 depending on how, or I'm sorry, number 3 or number 4 depending on how Michigan is positioned and depending on how Alabama and LSU plays out. And then you look at the schedule in Michigan. It's like Michigan's in a spot right now where they're really lucky because the only away game they have left that isn't Ohio State is Rutgers, and they had the opportunity to play Wisconsin and Penn State at home, along with their only real tough away game besides Notre Dame so far being Michigan State, which was half filled, and those half, probably a good 30 to 35% were Michigan fans. So they got lucky to be able to make out of this. I shouldn't say they got lucky to win the games. I should say that when it comes to these final 3 games, look back at 2016, they still had to go to Kinnick at night, and we all know how that happened. Now, what's the fear? Piscataway, Rutgers, and then you get Indiana at home, and Michigan owns Indiana. I think the streak is something crazy. I don't have the number on top of my head right now, but Michigan owns Indiana, and Indiana hasn't done that great. They don't really have much of an offense right now. And then, of course, you have the big one, the game, Columbus. You expect Ohio State to improve like they do every year, but you watch that game against Nebraska today being Saturday, and you have to think, time is running out for them to adjust on defense. They cannot protect. They cannot defend the pass. I almost said protect. They cannot defend the pass. They certainly can't defend the run. I mean, they are just abysmal. And in big plays, which we're starting to see Michigan draw up a lot more when the time needs it, they can't stop the big play. So if Michigan is doing all the things right now to beat Ohio State. Like I said, Ohio State certainly should improve if they're anything like past Ohio State teams, but we were talking about them improving every year with about, 8 weeks left, about 7 weeks left until Michigan. They've got 2 weeks left to improve, and the confidence is starting to waver. Not only, and you can see it in their fan base. I had Ohio State fans tweeting at me today saying that Michigan was going to be a 7-point favorite at Columbus. I can't tell you the last time Michigan was a favorite in Columbus. It might have been over 15 years. I'm not sure, but it's been a long time. And, yeah, I mean, Michigan has a path. A pretty clear path. I mean, there's no construction. You just got to cruise and do what you've done. If Michigan plays like it did against the Pat, if Michigan plays like it did, a lot of people will say if Michigan plays like it did tonight, sure. But there's been 8 weeks of consistency, especially the past 3. If they can muster 80% of that in Columbus, they'll walk out winners.
Well, you know what? With that being said, if Michigan wins out, they're in the college football playoff. They're in the top 4, no doubt about it. And also no doubt about the fact that justice has been served once again. From Brandon Justice of the Wolverine Lounge. Brandon, thanks for all the time, man.
Thank you.
And thanks to Brandon Justice for all the time on this special edition of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And now rolling right on with my chats with Josh and Chase, and first and foremost with Josh Uche. Is this the most complete game that you guys have played so far this year, too?
I don't even know. I just know we play hard every game. We're going to do what we got to do. So I couldn't tell you if it's the most complete, the most emotional, or whatever, but we played hard.
Much has been said about the identity of this team. What would you say is the true identity of this team?
There's so many identities. Like, I couldn't, fast, physical, angry, emotional, greedy. You just got to pick one of those ones, man. It's a lot.
How sweet was getting the revenge, too?
No, it's not sweet until we get a championship, in my opinion.
What did you see in Trace McSorley today?
I don't really know. They didn't do much against us, to be honest with you. So.
And what do you think he was limited to? What did you guys do to limit his production?
Nothing. We just did our game plan. There's no secret formula to it. We just did what the coaches told us.
And thanks to Josh. And now to my chat with Chase Winovich. And this first question that I ask him is about whether or not yesterday's game against Penn State was the most complete game that Michigan has played all season long. Enjoy.
I don't know if it's the most complete game. I think there was some stuff we could have done. I think we kicked it out of balance on special teams one time. There's areas of improvement I think we could definitely have as a team. But yeah, we're going to look at it and just keep moving forward. I think as you go forward, your baseline changes. It's like your expectations for yourself and for your team. Like, had we played this game week 1, it would have been like the most joyous victory. But honestly, in the locker room, like we were happy about the way things went. But we were honestly mad we gave up a touchdown. Like, it just, your expectations change. That's the best way I could put that, I'd say.
How would you describe the identity of this team as well?
The identity of this team is we're just a gritty, physical, fast. Like, I feel like any good adjective that you can give a football player, I'd say we identify with most of them. We're smart. We know our assignments and our schemes, and we play those well. And we're hungry too. So, like I said, there's any good adjective that describes a football player. I'd say, we're at least a decent bit of that, if not more.
And that's all she wrote on this special edition of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, recapping Michigan's victory over Penn State, 42-7. Hope you guys enjoyed my interviews with Brandon Justice, Josh Uche, and Chase Winovich. I'll talk to you guys again with my Pat Henkin interview coming out later today. Until then, adios.